Amendment by Schoolcraft.
Chair recognizes Mr. Schoolcraft to explain the substitute to the amendment to the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, this is actually a pretty big deal. There's a few $1 billion involved here. This is a substitute because Representative Bernal is actually addressing an area that I'm also going to address. It's going to get a little complicated. I hope I can explain it to help folks understand. Members, this amendment will raise the basic allotment by $1,444. That's $1,444 per student without increasing the cost of this bill. I actually got my inspiration for this bill from our own Chairman Buckley. Now, I'm not saying he's for this amendment, but just before we passed this bill out of committee, I wrote down some of his words, and he said, "The fairest and most equitable way to fund public education is through the basic allotment." I agree. I think there's almost universal agreement. The basic allotment takes money and it funds it equally for every student in the state of Texas. Members, the basic allotment is very easy to understand. As I said, it takes a single amount, gives it to every district equally across the state. But piled on top of that basic allotment is layer after layer of complexity. Seriously, is there anyone in this chamber who is not frustrated with the sheer complexity of our school finance system? Is there anyone in this chamber who thinks it's a good thing that we have a school finance system that spends $101 billion and yet nobody understands it? I want to give you one example of how this screwed up system distorts things. I printed out from the TEA's website the PEIMS data for 2 districts. This is the actual financial details submitted by those districts. I happen to choose Dallas ISD and Cypress Fairbanks ISD. They're both significantly larger than 100,000. They're big districts. They're comparable districts in many ways. Now, you would think they would have approximately comparable funding per student. But off of these, if anyone wants to come look at them, you would see that on the line operating and other revenue, Dallas ISD has $18,673. Cypress Fairbanks, has $13,614. Members, that's a $5,059 difference per student between those districts.686 means that Dallas is getting $703,686.64 more than Cy-Fair. Or let's look at the grand total operating and non-operating expenditures line on these printouts. Dallas ISD gets $22,990 per student. Cy-Fair gets $16,000, and that's a difference of $6,943. What that means is we would have to fund and give Cy-Fair $743 and $528 more in order to fund them at the same amount per student as Dallas ISD. Well, you think, well, must be because Cy-Fair is a wealthy district, right? Well, again, further down on these reports, it shows that local property tax from M&O, i.e. generated locally, Dallas generates $8,903 per student. Cy-Fair generates $3,731 per student, significantly less local revenue. Members, this is just an example, but let's talk about how to fix this, members. this mess. Members, the way to increase the basic allotment by $1,444 without spending more money is to rip out a huge chunk of the complexity in our school finance system and begin distributing more of our tax dollars through the simple to understand, fair, and equitable basic allotment. So let's talk about how this amendment funds the increase. The increase will be funded by repealing what very well may be the biggest scam in the entire state budget. It's hiding in plain sight in the Texas Education Code. If the basic allotment is the fairest and most equitable way to fund public education, the compensatory education allotment is the exact opposite. Now, what I'm doing, I'm addressing the compensatory education allotment just like Representative Bernal, except he's just taken the part he wants and putting it in his program. I'm saying we repeal the whole thing and put it into the basic allotment. That comp ed allotment is convoluted, politically manipulated, and it's a grotesque distortion of how we distribute the money in this state. Under this bill, the comp ed allotment will redistribute $5.8 billion without regard to any kind of logical plan. Again, I said it will distribute $5.8 billion. Now let's talk about allotments. We keep talking about those. Let's make sure we're all on the same playing field here with understanding. Our school finance system uses a concept called allotments. The basic allotment is a dollar amount that schools receive for every student. In addition to the basic allotment, there are allotments such as the special education allotment, the gifted and talented allotment, the career and technical education allotment, and the bilingual allotment, and there are others. But those ones I listed are all student-based allotments. That meaning that those allotments fund schools for the costs of services provided to the student who generates the funding. You have a student in one of these programs, we fund it. Let's talk about the comp ed allotment on the other hand. Instead of funding based on students receiving services, the compensatory allotment is completely different. The funding for the comp ed allotment is not generated based on students receiving services. The compensatory education allotment is calculated and dispersed to school districts almost entirely based on the number of enrolled students who are on the federal free and reduced lunch program and who live in low-income census blocks. These students are called educationally disadvantaged. Keep in mind, there is nothing that requires any specific services be provided to the students generating the comp ed funding. Let me repeat that. There is nothing that requires any specific services to be provided to the individual students who generate the funding. So let me review what I've said. If we do not adopt this amendment, the compensatory education allotment in this bill will redistribute $5.8 billion to some school districts based on the number of students enrolled in the district who now live in low socioeconomic blocks and who are on the free and reduced lunch program. Members, here's another very important fact to remember about this allotment. The compensatory education allotment is calculated as a percentage of the basic allotment. That means every time we increase the basic allotment, we flood more money into this comp ed allotment. For example, if this amendment is not adopted, the modest increase in the basic allotment included in this bill will add another $454 million.
Ms. Richardson, for what purpose?
Not at this time.
The gentleman does not yield.
This bill will add $454 million to the already bloated comp ed funding. Here's another really important fact to keep in mind.
The gentleman's time has expired.
Extend.
When yield for questions.
The gentleman's time has expired.
Motion to extend.
Members, is there objection? Chair hears none. The gentleman's time is extended.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, members. All right, this is a very important part. The comp-ed allotment, oh, I already covered that. Let me go on. Sorry. Teacher salaries. Anyone here interested in teacher salaries? Members, in this bill, 40% of increases in the basic allotment go to salaries. Teachers are the ones who will have a massive benefit from this change. Let me get back to my reading. Under this bill, funding for teacher salary increases is also tied to the basic allotment. The bill specifies that 40% of any basic allotment increase must be used for salary increases. This amendment provides for a $1,444 increase in the basic allotment. That would result in a tremendous teacher salary increase, at least funding for that. So to review, this amendment raises the basic allotment by $1,444. It yanks out a huge piece of complexity that's in the education code. It increases teacher pay, and it does all of this without increasing the cost of the bill. I'll yield for questions.
Ms.
Thank you.
Ms.
Mr.
Richardson, for
Speaker.
what purpose?
Will the gentleman
I
yield
yield.
for questions?
Gentleman
All right.
yields.
Thank you. So, Representative Schoolcraft, besides the compensatory education allotment that you've been talking about, are there any other allotments that are affected by this amendment?
Actually, well, yes, it is indirectly. And this is another important part to understand about school finance and the basic allotment. The other major student-based allotments automatically go up when we increase the basic allotment. So with my amendment, over the current bill, we would increase special education funding by $2,296,000. We would increase bilingual education by $179 million. It will increase dyslexia allotment by $45,400,000. Career and technology education by $645 million. Early education allotment will increase by $143 million. So all of those allotments go up automatically based on the basic allotment. So when we increase the BA, it also increases funding for those other programs that are providing services to our students.
All right. Thank you for that clarification.
Mr. Speaker,
Mr. Dutton, for what purpose?
will the gentleman yield for questions?
Does the gentleman yield for questions?
I yield.
Gentleman yields.
Thank you. Let me ask, how is, and this is for the body, how does a school district qualify for compensatory education funding?
The district receives funding based on the number of students enrolled who are on the free and reduced lunch program and who live in low-income census blocks.
Okay, good. And so how is the money spent in Comp Ed?
Pretty much it can be spent for however they want to spend it. It's very confusing to try to follow the rabbit trail on the code sections, because it makes it look like we have to spend it for this and that. It even says 45% has to be spent on Comp Ed programs, meaning, 55%, 45% you can do whatever you want with. But if you look closely, districts who have 40% or more Comp Ed students, which is a huge number of districts, they can spend their money based on what qualifies for Title I expenditures. And if you go look at Title I, by the way, I have a whole folder full of stuff on Title I. Basically, they permit whole, well, let's see, let me find it. Permits whole campus funding, and they can use this funding, Title I, or Comp Ed money, for hiring additional teachers or aides, reducing class size, offering tutoring, training teachers, workshops, counseling, extended learning, purchasing hardware or software, training staff, etc. So they can pretty much use the money however they want. It's like a basic allotment.
And the 40% comes off the top that they can obviously do whatever they want to with.
It's 45% correct.
I mean,
They can do
45%,
anything they want.
Right.
With the rest of it, they have to report it, but they report it and they can do just about anything they want also.
And do we know specifically what they actually spend it on?
No, we don't.
And if we put it in a basic allotment, we would have a better track on comp ed money and how it's spent.
We would be putting it into the basic allotment, giving the school districts the flexibility to determine how that money can best be spent for their districts under their conditions and their student demographics.
And does your amendment do away with Chairman Bernal's amendment?
It will replace Chairman Bernal's amendment. That's
In total?
correct. Yes.
In total? So,
Yes.
So that will be gone, and what you would do is add, what, $1,444 to the basic allotment?
Correct.
And so the basic allotment then, and 40% of that, now rather than going to something we don't know about, would actually go to teacher salary increases, would it not?
Yes, sir. That's correct. You've got it.
I think you got a good amendment.
Thank you.
Mr. Frank, for what purpose?
Does the gentleman yield for questions?
Does the
I
gentleman
yield.
yield for questions? Gentleman
yield.
yields.
Yeah, thank you. Representative Schoolcraft, I appreciate what you're trying to do here, but is this the same bill, SB2, Dr. Buckley's bill that we discussed for 2 days in the Public Education Committee that you and I are both on?
Yeah, I've actually discussed this with him also. That's correct.
Yeah, and I know you know a great deal about it, but I don't recall really ever having any substantive conversations by you on this amendment. So I feel like while I like some of what you're saying, to me it is catching, as a committee member, honestly, by surprise. So I wondered, do you have any runs? Like I know Dr. Buckley has spent a lot of time and has provided us all runs so we know what the impact is to our schools. Do you have any runs so that we understand what your amendment actually does to all the school districts that we all represent?
Actually, on the first point you made, you might have been absent in the committee when we had a discussion about comp ed. We talked about the history, how it was created back in the early 80s to redistribute. And actually I visited with Dr. Buckley a couple days ago and said, will you help me get runs? And he basically said, there's not going to be time to get it done. It took 5 days. So unfortunately, everybody's going to have to vote on whether or not they think this is good policy.
Okay. And I appreciate it. I didn't mean that we didn't have some discussions on comp ed, but in terms of, to me, this amendment completely overturns really all of the work that all of the committee members have done, and it completely overturns all of the runs. So while I appreciate what you're trying to do, certainly cannot support it. Thank you.
Well,
Ms. Morella-Shaw, for what purpose?
Yes, Mr. Speaker. Will the gentleman yield for a couple of questions?
Does
I
the
yield.
gentleman
Thank you.
yield?
Rep. Schoolcraft, thank you for your thorough explanation. So does your amendment actually add state funds to this bill?
it does not.
Okay, so it's part of moving what's already been allocated around, correct?
Correct.
And we see that a lot of the funds that are being moved around are because of recapture has been either completely reduced to zero in some districts or greatly reduced. I have a couple here that are reduced by half. In fact, the impact is a $480 million reduction by the budget board is what they say, correct?
That I don't know.
Okay.
I don't touch the rest of the bill dealing with the recapture, any of that.
You're just saying that we're not adding money from the general funds. We're taking the same money that was already moved around, but now we're adding it to the basic allotment, basically because the schools have said $1,300 roughly would catch us up with the inflation they've gone through and the deficit that they experienced because we didn't fund them last session. Is that where your logic comes from?
No, my logic actually doesn't come from what any district specifically asked for, although this does align with that request. My logic simply comes from the idea that we have money that is distributed in a way that nobody can comprehend why it goes to one district and not the other. So instead of distributing the money that way, We will instead distribute it through the basic allotment so that it's fair and equitable for everybody.
Does your amendment also equalize the various impacts that are on the sheets that we got, where there are disparities that you mentioned earlier, like you may see a half reduction in one district and you may see a quarter reduction in another district? Does your amendment equalize that?
Gentleman's time has expired.
Can I request an extension, please? I know it's the second one. It's a yes or no answer.
This motion requires unanimous consent. Is there any objection? Chair hears none. The gentleman's time is extended.
Thank you. Thank you, members.
I think I understood your question about the disparities between the districts. It will help to reduce the disparities. Right now you have a district here, and a lot of the reason they're up here is because of this comp ed allotment. If we leave things as is, when we add money into the system, the $8 billion, it goes up like that. Everybody goes up some, but those who benefit from the comp ed go up even further. My amendment would not have anybody lose money because the $200 guarantee is still there, but these folks would catch up more. So we would have less disparity among the districts.
Got it. Well, and I thank you for your examples because Cy-Fair is one of my larger school districts in Houston, so I appreciate that, and I appreciate your attempt for transparency and more equalized footing here. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Tinderholt, for what purpose?
Will the gentleman yield for questions?
I yield.
Gentleman yields.
Thank you, sir. So I want to understand this. Money does not come from anywhere else. There's not additional funds put in. Is that correct?
That's correct.
The largest district that I represent was asking for about $1,400 to $1,600 to make up for inflation and things that have happened since COVID. So with this, essentially, what I'm hearing, I want to make sure I understand. We're at about 400 right now, and this would bring it to 1,400 per student
That's correct.
with no additional cost.
Correct.
So I want to reiterate that. We're going from about a $400 increase per allotment for a student to a $1,400 per student with no additional cost for the state and no additional monies added to the amount we're already appropriating.
That's correct, Mr. Tinderholt.
To be honest, I don't know how we wouldn't vote for this. I feel like this is an easy yes vote.
It makes total sense and it's logical. I just hope they go with it. All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Van Dever, for what purpose?
Will the gentleman yield?
I yield.
Gentleman yields.
Thank you. Representative Schoolcraft, so I think in response to Representative Tinderholt's question, I got the impression that this is new money coming into the system, that we're going to increase the basic allotment $1,400 without costing anything, and it's going to be new money. Is that the case?
No, sir.
Okay, so actually what you're doing is just moving money. You're increasing the basic allotment, but you're just moving money from somewhere else to do that.
I'm taking money out of a distorted, complex distribution system nobody can explain and moving it into the basic allotment to add fairness and equity to the system.
Actually, there are people that can explain it, but let me ask you this. Will your amendment pick winners and losers among school districts?
No, sir, I don't pick winners and losers. I just pass good policy.
No, I would suggest that maybe this does pick winners and losers because you're reallocating money based on the basic allotment with no runs. I represent Texarkana ISD. Can you tell me how this is going to affect Texarkana ISD?
I can tell you that they'll have a better way of understanding how much money they're getting and why they're getting it and how to compare themselves to other folks because it'll be more fairly distributed to them.
And that's going to make it okay with them to receive less money as long as they understand why they're receiving less money.
Let me point out, nobody under this bill, even with my amendment, loses money. There's a guaranteed minimum increase of at least $200 per student. Yes, there is. Yes, there is.
No, but I would challenge you on that there will be districts that will receive less comp ed money because moving money from comp ed to basic allotment.
There will be districts who receive less additional money, and there will be districts who receive more additional money.
and that's winners and
as
losers.
we get more fair and equitable, because if you object to that, you would have to be acknowledging that the current system is neither fair nor equitable.
No. That's-
Wouldn't you agree?
No, sir, I would not agree. I would disagree. Absolutely. To try to do something like this, make a major change in our funding system like you're trying to do with no runs, I just believe that's very risky, and really, I can't imagine voting for something that I have no idea how it's going to affect my districts, although I can predict some of my districts who have some of the hardest to educate students are going to actually come out with less money under your plan.
I would say that the fairest and best way to do it is a vote on policy. I'll point out also, in our committee, Representative Bernal specifically said, let's don't have runs. We didn't get runs in the committee because we wanted to make our decision based on policy. When we voted the bill out, then we got runs. It's the same thing here, members. What is good policy? We have a system that you can't understand. We have to do something about that.
Can I ask you another question, sir?
You may.
So, New Boston ISD, where I used to serve as superintendent, has about 75% socioeconomic disadvantaged. So their compensatory ed is based on that percentage. Is that correct? Based
Well,
on
it depends on free and reduced lunch and,
Well,
and
that's-
if they're in the census block. See, that's the
Okay,
problem.
okay.
It depends on how they're dispersed. You can have kids on free and reduced lunch
Okay.
that don't live in low economic census blocks. So we really don't know.
Well, that's not the case for New Boston ISD. It's the free and reduced lunch, 75%. I don't want to pick on any other district, but would it be accurate to say that money that has been flowing to New Boston ISD with a 75% low socioeconomic would now flow to Highland Park, who probably has maybe a 5% low socioeconomic?
No, probably not. Again, if it's 75%, I suspect the cutoff's going to be around 85 or 90% of comp ed kids, that they will wind up getting less new money because the $1,444 allotment raises so much.
You're taking comp ed money from low socioeconomic school districts and you're sending it to wealthy districts. That's exactly what your amendment's doing.
I am sending it to a basic allotment that distributes it to every single district in this state. Every district, every student in this state will receive the increased basic allotment. You cannot get any more fair or equitable than that.
Mr. Schoolcraft, I disagree with you. I think this is a terrible amendment, and I ask people to join me in voting against it.
Will the gentleman yield?
Mr. Bryant, for what purpose?
Will the gentleman yield for questions?
Does the gentleman yield?
I yield for questions.
Gentleman yields.
Mr. Schoolcraft, I'm a member of Public Education Committee as well, and I wanted to echo Mr. Frank's comments. This is a major change in a very complicated bill, which is complicated for a good reason. And we didn't see this amendment in the committee, did we?
No, you didn't.
Okay. It is the case that the bill is filled with a lot of different areas from which you could have taken funding. Isn't that correct?
Well, I could have taken it from any place, but this is the only section I know that is distributed with no logic to it.
But you could have
This is the only allotment that has no student tied to it. There is no other allotment like this that doesn't fund it based on the students receiving the services. This is the most logical thing to get rid of because of the complexity it generates.
Yeah, the point I'm asking you to debate with me is this. You could have taken this money out of charter schools. You could have taken this money out of the allotment for teacher incentives. You could have taken it from a lot of places, but you've taken it from the poorest kids and the most needy kids in the state, haven't you?
Are you saying they're dumb or there's some reason that they need extra money? I mean, I'm just curious. Why is it you think we need to...
I have no further questions, Mr. Speaker.
On top of the federal money, there's $11 billion being distributed on this basis. There's no justification for that.
Chair recognizes Mr. Schoolcraft to close on the amendment to the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, first of all, as far as advance notice, first time I saw Mr. Bernal's amendment was when I was up providing my amendment. We didn't discuss it in committee. We didn't see runs. We didn't do anything. I mean, I'm not saying he didn't talk with Chairman Buckley beforehand, just like I did. But this is not some sort of a, gotcha last-minute deal. Representative Bernal said, I think I heard him say 2/3 of the districts will lose money. That, I don't know where he's getting that from. There's no way to know that, frankly. But no district in this state will lose money under this amendment. There's an absolute guaranteed minimum increase for every district of $200 per student. That's the minimum amount. The question about whether or not now is the time to do it. This is a big change. But very rarely do we have the opportunity to make this kind of positive change in our school finance system. It does shift around money, but because we are putting so much extra money into the system, we're able to put a floor and guarantee every district is going to get more money. That is expensive. There is a good chunk of money going to that guarantee that otherwise could have increased the basic allotment even more. So we're being fair to everybody. You generally can't make changes in public education finance unless you're putting a ton of money in it because of the problem it creates requiring hold harmless. Basically, if we don't make this change now, while we're providing this kind of funding for the entire system, we won't have another opportunity like this probably for decades. So, with that, I ask you to please vote yes on this amendment.
Mr. Schoolcraft sends up a substitute amendment. A record vote has been requested. The clerk will ring the bell. Show Mr. Buckley voting nay. Show Mr. Bernal voting nay. Show Mr. King voting nay. Show Mr. Hunter voting nay. Show Mr. Dutton voting nay. Show Mr. Harris voting nay. Have all members voted? Have all members voted? There being 25 ayes and 121 nays, the substitute amendment fails.